Hi from Maxwell Street. You're watching Channel 11, WTTW Chicago.
We still do not know how often the implants leak, and when they do, we do not know exactly what materials get into the body.
Good evening, I'm John Calloway, and welcome to Chicago Tonight. The controversy over the safety of silicone gel breast implants is having an immediate economic impact on the leading manufacturer of those implants, and a psychological impact on many of the 2 million American women who have had implants and may be wondering now if they are safe. The Dow Corning Corporation announced earlier this week that it has shut 2 plants that make the silicone breast implants. That news followed Dow's strong reaffirmation of the safety of the silicone breast implants after the New York Times published articles claiming that scientists who had worked years for Dow Corning had written memos in which they urged the company to stop putting off safety studies of the implants. And all of this came on the heels of the Food and Drug Administration's request for a voluntary 45-day moratorium on the use of silicone gel implants. In an editorial in the Chicago Tribune this week, the issue was put succinctly, quote, maybe the breast implants should be banned. Maybe not. Maybe women who have a silicone gel implant should have it removed. Maybe not. What is most inexcusable in the whole sorry debacle about silicone gel breast implants is the lack of accurate, trustworthy information, end quote from the Tribune editorial. Well, tonight we'll try to find out whether or not there is any trustworthy information about silicone gel breast implants and how to cope with or without reliable information. Beginning with this report from correspondent Elizabeth Brackett.
Okay, tell her to bring me the 325s.
Dr. David Ross had 5 breast implant surgeries scheduled last week. He had planned to use silicone gel implants in each case. That was before the surprise announcement by the Food and Drug Administration.
I am requesting a moratorium on the further use of all silicone gel breast implants.
So Dr. Ross switched to implants filled with saline rather than silicone. But he was not happy about it. He says saline feels less natural. And if a saline implant leaks, the breast immediately deflates.
We're totally convinced in the safety of the gel implant. We believe in the gel-filled implant, morally, ethically, medically, and I would use it, and I intended, obviously, to use it this week if they were available.
The information we've acquired since the last panel meeting, rather than dispelling doubts, has increased our concerns about the safety of these products. For example, we've recently received reports from rheumatologists that they are seeing an increasing number of autoimmune diseases among breast implant patients.
Evie Finley has suffered the kinds of symptoms the FDA is concerned about. Worried about her small breasts, Finley opted for silicone gel implants as a boost to her self-esteem. But shortly after her first surgery 11 years ago, her breasts hardened. After 2 more surgeries, she still felt burning sensations, joint pain, and chronic fatigue. She finally had a 4th surgery, replacing the silicone implants with saline ones, after learning that her silicone implant had broken.
One was ruptured, completely ruptured, and the gel had leaked out and traveled up into my shoulder. The other one, after they took them both out, the other one also was leaking.
Do you feel better now with the saline implants?
Well, I feel better mentally because I know that they're out of there.
At the moment, we're still waiting for additional information to come forth from the FDA. We're as stymied by the moratorium as everybody else is.
At the Why Me Breast Cancer Hotline, staff members were fielding panicky calls from women who had had silicone implants for years.
They're scared to death. Are these things going to cause a problem somewhere down the line? I'm happy with them, but should I have them taken out?
Sue Gold's breast reconstruction after a mastectomy was done with a silicone gel implant 3 years ago. She has been pleased with her implant, and she, like many, does not think the FDA has enough hard scientific data to warrant the moratorium.
I don't think the moratorium was necessary. I think study could have gone on while the implants remained on the market and viable.
I don't understand why they would even leave them on the market when they have a viable option, and I've had no problems with the saline. I think that they're fine.
Dr. Ross says the problem is that his patients' options have suddenly been cut in half. Before the moratorium, there were 5 major companies selling breast implants. Now, there are only 2. And Ross fears that FDA action and the threat of litigation could cause all implants to disappear from the market.
This is something I've been doing for close to 20 years, and I would never have dreamed that I would not have implants available. I always felt it was our best operation, really. We had so many satisfied individuals following this operation with really what I considered so few problems that the thought that an implant might not be available, I don't think crossed any of our minds.
So the question, says Dr. Ross, is whether the FDA move protects women's health or limits women's choices. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Elizabeth Brackett.
And now joining us are Kenneth Moll, who's attorney with the law firm of McDowell & Colatani Limited, which has some 50 lawsuits filed on behalf of women who have allegedly had serious side effects from silicone gel breast implants. Dr. Peter McKinney, who is professor of plastic surgery at Northwestern University Medical School and attending physician in plastic surgery at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. And Dr. McKinney also served as an investigator for the Food and Drug Administration, examining the safety of injectable silicone. Dr. Linda Huey-Holt, who is chairman of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Rush North Shore Medical Center, and she is the author of a book on women's midlife health issues called Midlife Health. And because of the bad weather, which delayed her flight from Cincinnati, via telephone, we have Nancy Lawson, who is partner with the Cincinnati-based law firm of Dinsmore & Scholl, which currently represents Dow Corning Wright in several product liability lawsuits involving silicone gel implants. Dr. McKinney, let me begin by you and ask you what you're hearing following all of this controversy and all of this news following the moratorium by the FDA. What are you hearing from your patients? What are they telling you?
Chronic fatigue syndrome. And I'm not being a wise guy. We've talked about silicone for over 30 years, and I think there's only one message that I can get to your viewers, which is extraordinarily important. I give you this from a perspective of someone who has studied this for 30 years, who has been an investigator with injectable silicone at the FDA, and this is an absolutely safe material. Now, that will bring howls of protest from a very small percentage of people, but the FDA has done something that should never have been done by a government agency. And they have unduly alarmed thousands of people who've been reconstructed with breast cancers on unfounded allegations. There's no science in this, John.
You've made a thesis statement, but I want to go back personally. Have you heard from any of your patients?
Yes, quite a few, even the coolest patients.
And what are you hearing?
They're terribly upset and they're worried. They're reassured after they speak with me, and I send them the scientific information and explain it the same way to them, that the science supports the safety of this material. Politics is another issue, and that's what's happening here.
And have you heard from anybody who's had a problem, who perhaps thought, well, it's simply a health problem, but who's now thinking, wait a minute, doctor, maybe it's related to the breast implants? Any of those persons?
I haven't, but I don't do a whole lot of these operations because I explain to the patient they're going to have hassles the rest of their life, and this is an example of the hassles they have.
Now, when you say they're going to have hassles, when you explain to patients they're going to have hassles, are you in effect saying don't even do this implant?
I try and talk them out of it.
Why do you do that?
Because of this very situation. I know this is going to happen. It's gone on every 5 years for 30 years. There's always a new accusation, and when tracked down, it doesn't hold water. And let me just finish with one thing, because this is very important so you understand my perspective. Science is very vulnerable to these sorts of attacks, because as a good scientist, I must always say, hey, maybe, possibly, I got to look into this. Every time a new charge comes up, we look into it. We've looked into it for 30 years. The last new charge didn't hold any water.
But you know that nothing is perfectly safe, so therefore
Absolutely.
You'll have anecdotal evidence that says this case, this case, this case, and this case out of millions of cases.
And I'll look into it. because I want to make darn sure that it's not harmful.
Now, Dr. Holt, before we go to the policy issues on this, you have had implants, have you not? I mean, tell us about your own experience personally with this.
Well, I developed breast cancer about 3.5 years ago and ran through all the various choices at that time. I had a family history, had a mother and sister that had both had mastectomies with no reconstructive surgery, and I think it was devastating for them psychologically. I knew if I had to go through that type of surgery, I was going to want reconstructive surgery. The implants offered the simplest, quickest, safest method for me. I've been very pleased personally. I would do it again.
Now, this is silicone.
Yes.
Not saline.
No, I have silicone implants.
So you've not had a problem?
No, I have had no problems. Now, that doesn't mean they're not problematic. I mean, moving to the politics a little, as a women's health activist from way back, I have some concerns about the fact that the implants were essentially grandfathered in without any safety data in the first place, and concerns that we simply don't have the information we need to be able to give women to tell them. Autoimmune diseases, chronic fatigue syndrome, joint problems are very common in women. They're much more common in women than men. And 2 million women of reproductive and post-reproductive age have had implants. You would expect a fair number of women with implants are going to have chronic fatigue, are going to have joint problems. The fact that one woman has had a great experience and another woman is having problems doesn't tell you whether those problems are related to the implants or not. And what we need is data. I mean, what we need is some studies.
All right, but I want to go to this. When you had the implants done, did your physicians say to you, this product will last you a lifetime?
My plastic surgeon practically scared me to death about the implants. I mean, he walked through every step along the way, all of the various potential problems, potential benefits, and I can't claim, there are a lot of women claiming that they weren't informed of risks and benefits before they had implants put in. And you know, you can never be...
Did he tell you the life? Did he say this will last a lifetime, this will last 10 years? Or did you even discuss the issue of longevity of these?
We discussed the issue.
And what did he say, or she?
He said some of them will last 20 years, some of them they can start to leak, some of them can do this, they can do that.
So you knew they could leak going into this?
Yes.
And other side effects. That was clearly discussed.
Right.
And do you think it's discussed with most patients? Do you think there is that upfront conversation?
Is.
I mean, Dr. McKinney's saying, hey, I tell him not, you know, not even to do it. All right, now, Mr. Moll, since this controversy erupted, now you've, just to reintroduce you, you have brought some 50 lawsuits on behalf of persons who said they've had problems. How far back do those lawsuits go?
Back to the late 1960s, early 1970s.
And how many of those suits have been resolved one way or the other?
They have not been resolved. They've not been filed recently. This is a recent issue, and you're going to find
I see. All of them are
these
filed recently, but some go back to problems in the 60s.
That's correct.
Okay.
Commenting on what the doctor said, to date we have not filed a lawsuit against any of the plastic surgeons. Our fault is not with the plastic surgeons. Our fault is with the manufacturers. We have, through court discovery, received documents under protective orders that the physicians themselves have not seen. Without this information, the doctors are not to blame for the fault that the manufacturers knew about.
They're flying blind?
Yes. They do not have this information. They
just give us an example of information that they don't have that you know is going to come out.
An example is what was alluded to in the New York Times, the memos, the internal memos at Dow Corning Corporation, doctors saying, what's going on? Are we going to do some tests or studies with this? Why are we pushing? Dow Corning hired a task force to get these implants on the market in 1975 to compete with their competitor, McGann Medical Corporation. They did not, they were implanting the silicone implants in women without doing any conclusive tests, studies, and to date they have not done one substantial long-term study as to the effects of silicone.
All right, now I want to go to Nancy Lawson, and I want to remind our viewers, we're taping this on Wednesday for Thursday, and the weather on Wednesday made it impossible. Ms. Lawson was good enough to try to get to the airport, went all the way out to the airport to try to get to Chicago, but that storm was hitting through Ohio. And so, Ms. Lawson, we thank you for being with us by telephone. And what do you have to say generally to what Mr. Moll has said?
Yes, I would like to respond to Mr. Moll. First of all, he's absolutely incorrect when he says that there aren't any safety studies that Dow Corning has conducted. Dow Corning has conducted safety studies on silicones and specifically on the silicones in breast implants. Let me finish, please. For 30 to 40 years. And the task force that he's referring to in 1975 was a task force to develop an improved product. It had nothing to do with a new product. And in 1975, breast implants had been on the market for 10, 11, or 12 years, and there were over 100 studies relating to those breast implants. So it's absolutely incorrect to say that there were no studies in 1975 relating to breast implants.
And in referring to one of those studies I'll refer to right now, wasn't it concluded that rats developed cancer from the silicone injections?
In 1975, no, that's not correct. You are referring to a study that was carried out later in which rats did develop what's called solid-state tumors. All of this was reported to the FDA, and the FDA concluded, as did Dow Corning, that these are specific cancers that develop in rats and in rats only, and it does not have any relationship to what happens in humans, and there is no scientific data to support the theory that silicone breast implants cause cancer. And on the other issue relating to the autoimmune disease, there's also no scientific evidence that silicone breast implants cause autoimmune disease. The statistics are that women with breast implants do not have a higher incidence of autoimmune disease, or really any other disease, than women without breast implants.
Ms. Lawson, I know that Dr. McKinney wants to get in on this, but I have just one follow-up question, and that is the New York Times made a great deal out of reporting that some of the scientists that used to work for Dow Corning had suggested that in the research that had gone into this, that there had been no research with animals with respect to the implants in breast tissue. Is that true?
The question is whether there were studies in animal breast tissue.
Yes.
Yes, I think there were studies of animals in breast tissue. And just let me make a comment on those memos, because I have seen a lot of those memos.
Please.
These memos, some of them are wrong, first of all, where an individual at Dow Corning makes a certain statement about testing that that individual believes has not been done, but it actually had been done. There are other memos.
In other words,
where,
you're simply saying that this is in dispute.
Right.
All right.
I mean, there are also memos that say, I think we should do such and such a test, and the test is later done. And I think if we're talking about safety, which is really what the issue is here, we need to look at the body of scientific tests. And that's what the FDA should be looking at, and they should be hiring the best scientists they can to look at that data and to evaluate what that data says. And I think if they do that, they will see that the breast implants are safe.
Dr.
Just
McKinney.
one more thing. The AMA, American Medical Association, very recently reviewed the safety of breast implants and looked at the data, and they concluded they're safe. And I believe they have advised Dr. Kessler of the FDA that he should.
Okay, Dr. McKinney wants to get in on this.
I want to jump in for just a moment, because this is terribly important. These are the two major questions that I get. Do they cause cancer, and do they cause connective tissue disease? To simplify the whole thing, they do neither.
And what if I were your patient, I said, and do they tend to leak? What would you say?
Let me answer the cancer and connective tissue, because that's extraordinarily important.
Please follow up.
People with breast implants have a lower incidence of cancer of the breast. So should we all have implants to protect ourselves against cancer? So drop the cancer issue. It won't hold water.
The
second one is, and connective tissue disease is the last thing that's been brought up. And an inert material cannot cause an immune disease. That changes all of science. But again, as a scientist, I will look at this very carefully, because I want to be the first to know if I'm harming something. And to have an attorney present the science to me would be like having me present the law to you. It doesn't work.
No, wait just a second.
We take the blinders out and show you the documents that doctors compiled. Now, the argument that Dow Corning tried to assert is the fact that there are no studies out there to prove this. They are trying to benefit from the fact that they didn't conduct the studies that they were required to do prior to putting the implants on the market. That argument failed in California when there was a jury verdict for
Now, we're trying all to talk at the same time. Let Mr. Moll finish, please.
There was a jury verdict for $7.34 million to a woman out there. Now, the jurists all were allowed to see these documents and review for themselves, and they came down with that verdict. There was a $4.5 million verdict in New York because that jury saw the same documents. And there was another verdict in Alabama for $5.4 million. So once you will see the documents, you will see that the safety studies that were conducted.
As a scientist, I'll look at anything, but lawsuits are showbiz. It's got nothing to do with
No, it keeps doctors and manufacturers in line. Without lawsuits,
what keeps the lawyers in line? There are now 100 people unemployed because of this
clearly, the
issue.
legal profession is going to benefit greatly if there are big lawsuits over
That's where the employment growth is.
What you're failing
Maybe the
to
Japanese
realize,
will put implants.
What you're failing to realize is there is a viable alternative: saline implants.
It's made of silicone too. Did you know
silicone?
that?
Wait, what are you saying?
Yes, it's a more.
I'm sorry.
You're aware of that?
Doctor,
yes,
tell me.
Okay,
doctor, wait. Hang on a minute. The doctor's saying something. Would you repeat that?
A saline implant is a balloon made of silicone that's filled with salt water. So if silicone is this vicious instrument, why is this going to make any difference?
Because it's a solid. It's more viscous.
Again, we hear the
liquid
science
silicone.
from the attorney.
What you have is scavenger cells that eat up the silicone.
What's a scavenger shell now?
Yeah, I want to get Dr. Holt back in the conversation. Okay. What do you say to the woman who's watching this program who says, look, I'm really now confused. I've already got an implant. I'm worried about it. What do you say to her?
I say there is not yet the kind of data you're looking for, and if you're not having any problems, why worry about it? If you're having a problem, get the implant taken out.
Or at least get an examination and see what the problem is. What would you say, Doctor?
Let me answer one thing for Dr. Holt, though, because I've spoken to the people who are doing work on the rheumatology and removing implants. There's a plastic surgeon in Florida who's doing this. I gave her boards, as a matter of fact. I talked to her at the fall meeting, and I made darn sure I made no mistake of this. I said, is there evidence that if someone's having these symptoms, I should take their implants out? She said no.
All right, but so, now the other question I wanted to is, if you were to talk to the FDA with respect, I mean, this 45 days is going to be going pretty quickly. If you were to talk with respect to the future, would you advise them to try to make any distinction between the cases involving cosmetic surgery, which I am told represents, what, 80% of the cases of implants, versus the reconstructive surgery? Is there a distinction that ought to be made?
Yes, I would make a strong distinction for several reasons. The major one being that the woman who is considering a cosmetic procedure, whether she gets it done now or whether she gets it done, you know, in a few months, hopefully when we have a better understanding of what is going on here, if anything, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. For a woman facing cancer surgery, if she does not have an implant put in, or is scared off from doing an implant, she has two choices. One is a much more involved plastics procedure for reconstruction, and a second choice is to have a delayed surgery later on after the controversy is settled. So she is facing the known risks of a second surgery. By taking the implants off the market, the FDA is limiting the choices of women that essentially may put them in the position of having to have a later surgery.
One last question. Anybody can answer it, and Dr. Holt, perhaps you're the person. Dr. McKinney, maybe you are, and that is, when there are problems, what are the symptoms?
Joint pain.
No, wait, I'd like a doctor to answer this.
Thank you, John.
Everybody
I
has
love the lawyer
pain.
answering the science here. It's marvelous. No disrespect, but give me a break, will you?
Right.
No, but I'm
what are 20 years to the medical literature out there.
Symptoms of what? Of problems. In other words, if a person is having problems with an implant, what might the symptoms be? Do you feel the implant breaking, I mean, in some cases?
No. They get hard, but that's not necessarily a problem that has to be treated. They don't get hard themselves. They get scar tissue around it. But I wanted to answer one thing that's terribly important that Dr. Holt brought up, and that's the alternative of this big flap procedure. And I just finished one. That's why I was a little late to the program. It took 8 hours to move the tissue from the abdomen to the chest, because the silicone had not worked for this particular individual for different reasons which would not involve you. And this is a more dangerous operation, great operation, but the silicone is much simpler. But I want to get to one other thing, because this is always brought up. What's the difference between cosmetic and reconstructive?
What is?
I don't know, because if I got a 16-year-old girl that's got no breast on one side, and she's got a huge breast on this side, and I build up a silicone breast, is that cosmetic? Should we deny that girl that chance?
You're saying that's an entire
For 2 months, yes. But they won't give us an answer in 2 months. They voted last fall that they should be kept on the market.
Nancy,
that's why the FDA
Nancy Lawson, I want to go back to you in Cincinnati. If I read the Wall Street Journal correctly, they're saying, hey, Good luck, Dow Corning, but you're out of business. Ralph Nader and the lawyers have got you on the ropes. You're closing down plants. Have a nice day. Science lost again. Are they right?
Yes.
Well, I don't think that that the battle is over. I think the science is certainly on Dow Corning's side to show that that they're safe. Whether Dow Corning will decide from a business decision that it just isn't worth it and go out of the business is not my decision.
This is exactly what happened to IUDs a few years ago. The company that made them pulled them off the market. The U.S. women were going to Canada to get their IUDs because they couldn't get them in the U.S. And I would be willing to bet Mexico and Canada will start thriving businesses in breast implants.
We should go back and revisit Dalcon Shield, DES, and thalidomide.
And IUDs are back on the market, and women are getting them put in today.
We ought to visit tort reform. That would be a more interesting one.
All right, but Dr. Holt, a couple of examples of symptoms of people who are having problems, what would they be?
Well, the major problem, which a woman might consider having an implant removed, would be pain and discomfort in the site of the implant. It is very unclear if chronic fatigue, joint pains, I think she ought to see a good rheumatologist.
You've got to see a doctor under one circumstance or another.
And
on that note, we have to thank Dr. McKinney and Dr. Holt and Ms. Lawson and Mr. Moll for being with us, and our thanks to you for being with us. I'm John Callaway. Thank you and good night. I have a final question while the credits are rolling, and that is the 45 days. People are saying, what's a 45-day moratorium about? I mean, do we have the science or don't we? And if we do, why a 45-day moratorium?
What they're going to do is try to lift the protective order.
Wait. I'm sorry.
What they're going to do is try to lift the protective order to take a look at the document.
Ms. Lawson, hang on a second.
Application, and it doesn't have anything more now than it had in July.
Well, as soon as
the 45-day moratorium really will do anything.
As soon as Kessler looks at the documents, I believe what he's trying to do is use that time to lift the protective order so he can look at the documents himself. And once he looks at the documents, they will show that Dow Corning knew.
Kessler has all the documents and has had almost all of them.
No, he doesn't.